retirement. This is something that every single person wants. We all want to one day be able to do whatever we want with whomever we want, whenever we want. However, it's not as easy as it seems. Today, I'm going to be talking about how we can retire within 20 years, regardless of your income. That's right, regardless of your income. So I'm going to talk about some of those strategies, what the most popular saving strategy is right now, called the 50-30-20 rule, what's really great about it. But I'm also going to share some ways that we can modify it and adjust it so that we can quickly begin retiring at a much faster rate. If you're as excited as I am, let's hop into this. Hey, what is up, everyone? My name is Sean. If you are new to this channel, welcome. If you are all about personal finance, learning how to save money, pay off debts, increase your income, investment strategies to build wealth, and essentially living life on your terms, then make sure you check out some of my other videos. Hit the subscribe button for more videos on those topics. And if you can do me a favor, smash that like button. It would absolutely mean the world to me. Today, we're talking about how you can retire within the next 20 years, regardless of your income. Now, the other day, I posted a video about how much money you should save by each age. And if you haven't watched that already, make sure you do so. I have it in the video description box below. In that video, we discussed some different, sections of your life and how much money you should have saved. But then I started thinking like, well, hey, why don't we actually talk about how much money you should spend or how you should budget your money so that you're able to retire in the next maybe 20 years. So let's talk about some of those strategies right now. Okay, so we all need money. We all have to spend money one way or another. I mean, there's things like rent, mortgage, clothes, groceries, food, eating out, shopping, all this stuff. I mean, it requires money to live, unfortunately, unless you have to be one of those lucky people whose parents pay for everything. And if that's the case, are your parents adopting by any chance? But with all jokes aside, you have to spend money one way or another. But I want to talk about how you should break up your spending and how you should allot your spending so that you can adequately save enough money to retire and as quickly as possible. Now, the most popular way of going about budgeting is what's called the 50-30-20 rule. And the way the 50-30-20 rule works is this. You start by taking your after-tax income. So that's how much money is left over after you pay your taxes. And you split it up accordingly. 50% is going to go to your needs or the things you need in order to survive. So that's going to be things like your housing, your food, your car, utilities. And these are going to be simple, basic things that you need in order to function and survive as a human being. The next portion is 30%, and that goes to your wants. So I want you to think of this as like your kind of extra expenditures, your little guilty pleasures. And this is going to be money that you can apply to maybe a slightly nicer house or a slightly faster car, or maybe you're really into food and restaurants and your ability to eat a little bit nicer or a little bit better quality foods. And the last part is going to be 20% goes towards your savings. And that's going to be things like your investment accounts, your IRAs, stock market, real estate, paying down any debts that you have, and creating a 6-month emergency plan. So this is one of the most popular strategies for budgeting, that 50-30-20 rule. And while I do think it's a very effective plan for a lot of people, and it's a great way of portioning out your stuff to make sure that you are saving, the problem becomes is that if you're only saving 20% of your income, it's going to take you about 37 years in order to retire, according to the 4% rule. So the 4% rule goes like this. If you're saving 20% of your after-tax income, and you're averaging around a 7% return each year on that money, you should be able to spend around 4% of your portfolio every year and live for the next 30 years while maintaining the same lifestyle. I have a few problems with this. Number one is the fact that it takes 37 years to get to the point where you can retire. And one of the reasons why I do feel that people have a really hard time committing to saving and saving for the retirement is simply because it's way too far down the road. So let's talk about the different categories and what I feel is a really good idea and a way that you should be budgeting out your money. So not only are you saving money, but more importantly, you're budgeting it in a way that you can retire within the next 20 years. So let's start with the first category, which is the 50% needs category. We'll talk in particularly with housing. Now, most experts agree that you should be spending around 33% of your income on housing. So you can look at this a couple different ways. For every $3,000 that you earn, you should only be spending about $1,000 on housing. Or another way to look at it is, if your rent is $1,200 a month, you should be earning at least $3,600 a month. And like I said, I do think this is a good start, because as a landlord who owns a lot of properties, when I'm looking at tenants who are going to be renting from me, I do make sure they have at least 3 to 4 times the income of their rent monthly. Now, while I do think the 33% rule is a good start, I do think that if you are trying to exponentiate your savings and retire at a much faster rate, your housing costs really should be around 25%, even ideally 20% of your income. Now, for some of you, this might be quite a challenge, especially if you live in expensive areas like I do, like in Los Angeles, or if you live in areas like New York, San Francisco, Miami, Chicago. If you spend more than 20-25% of your income, that may mean that you need to move to a less nice area of town. It may also mean that you need to get some roommates. You could move back with your parents, or you can get creative and rent out some of your rooms. So the next category is transportation. Now, according to most experts, your transportation costs shouldn't exceed any more than 15% of your total income. And then if you are buying a car, your car purchase should not be more than 35% of your annual income. So that means that, let's say you make $60,000 a year, your car should not exceed more than $21,000 in purchase, and it should not cost you any more than $9,000 a year. Now, I do really think this is pretty solid advice. You know, one expense that really causes people to fall behind in their savings rate is their vehicle. And let's face it, vehicles are expensive. Between the monthly payments, the insurance, the maintenance, parking expenses, if you have those two, those expenses add up, and it really causes us not to be able to save at the rate that we need to. Now, while I do agree that's a really good rate, if you want to be more extreme with it, you can do the Dave Ramsey method. For those of you who don't know who he is, you can check out some of his videos, but his videos are simply stating this. So Dave Ramsey believes that, number one, you should never buy a new car, and that your total car expenses should not exceed more than 10% of your annual income. And like I said, for those of you who are trying to save at a much faster rate and retire around 20 years, I would highly suggest that you utilize this as well. Now, the third section is food. Now, according to most experts, they say that your food costs should be no more than 10 to 15% of your income. So this means that if you're making somewhere around $60,000 a year, your food costs each month should be somewhere between $500 to $700 a month. And that would include groceries and eating out. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is that as your income increases, you do not want to match that to the 10%. Meaning that, yes, if you make 60 grand a year, $500 to $750 a month is pretty good. But if you started making over $100,000 a year, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be increasing your food expenditures to match. Then, you know, having an occasional eat out or going to a nice dinner here and there once in a while, it's not going to break the bank, and it's fine. So the other category is the other category, and this is going to be around 10 to 15%. This is going to include things like your insurance, which should be somewhere around 5%, and your utilities. And for most people, depending on where you live, that's probably going to range from like $50 up to like $200 a month. So at this point, we spent somewhere around 50 to 52% of our after-tax income so far, leaving us with around 48 to 50% left. Now, according to the 50-30-20 rule, 30% of this should now be going towards our wants. Now, while I do think it's important to have some wants, I do think 30% is way too high, especially if you're trying to retire in the next 20 years. If you're trying to retire in the next 20 years, you really should keep your wants around that 5 to 10% range. So what do you spend on the wants thing? Well, this is really you being able to go to town. My suggestion is find 1 or 2 categories that mean the most to you, that bring you the most happiness and fulfillment, and spend an extra 5 to 10% of your income on that thing, and to make the process a little more enjoyable. Because let's face it, if you're living in a shoebox for the next 20 years, it might get a little challenging after a while. So from there, everything else should go straight towards savings. And this is how I would go about the savings category. The very first thing I would do is all the extra money left over should first go to any high interest debts and paying that off. And high interest debts would be anything over 5 to 7%. So if you have any credit card debts, student loans, or anything that are over at least 5-7%, I would highly suggest you take that money first, pay off the debts as quickly as possible. After that, I would then target a 6-month emergency fund. You know, one of the things is that as you begin to grow and build yourself financially, you need to make sure you have at least a 6-month emergency fund for any type of emergencies. This can include job losses, your car breaking down, a refrigerator going out, or anything else that life likes to throw at us. After your emergency fund has been built up, at that point, that's when the investments kick in. The first thing I would target is your company's 401k plan. I would at least contribute what your company matches, because at that point, that's free money. From there, I'd invest in things like a Roth IRA or an IRA for a tax-deductible investment. And then after that, you're gonna have your investments, your taxable investments. That would just be like your normal mutual funds, your index funds, stocks, real estate, or anything of that matter. The reason why I like this plan so much is because almost 42% of our earnings are going towards savings. And this is why this is so effective and so important. Like I said earlier in this video, if you're only saving 20% of your income, it's going to take you close to 37 years in order to retire according to the 4% rule. However, if you are saving upwards of 42% of your income, that 37 years jumps down almost to 20 years. Now, the last piece of advice that I have for those of you who are going to follow this plan is, number one, is make sure you pay yourself first. So what does that mean? That means that as soon as you get your check, before you spend any money on anything, rent or food or groceries, you should have a separate account or some place that you can take that percentage of money, that 42%, and shove that money right into that account. And then from there, live on what's left over. Remember, failing to plan is planning to fail. And if you do not budget your money accordingly, your money will budget for you. And that means that you will be spending more money than you plan to. When things come up, you're not gonna be able to take care of them. We wanna make sure that we are paying ourselves first. And that is the secret to making sure that you budget in a way that pushes you to save. Make sure you comment below on your favorite strategies or what savings plan or budget plan that you have for yourself. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you smash that like button for me, hit the subscribe channel, and let's crush it.